The Boom Yeh.
Welcome back to All That Jam, where music has no limits. We are joined today by John Speedy from the Boom Yeh, a band that I was not familiar with until a couple weeks back. Got an email from your publicist, Jada, and she's great tips. She's got some great stuff there. And listen to some of it. I was like, we should talk to them. How you doing today, John?
Very well, mate. Thank you. Very well.
Nice.
It's great to be here.
You guys are what, like 10 years in?
It's actually about 13 years in. We started as the John Speedy Band back in about 2011, and then we decided to kind of change the format a little bit, and we became the Boom Yeh in about 2012, 2013, something like that. Okay. So yeah, and we've been mainly for the last 10 years concentrating on instrumental music. So it's been going well. Yeah.
Right. Now, same guys, or have you had turnover?
There's been a big rotation of musicians. So the main core of the band is me on guitar, and there's a sax player called Ian Bailey. The band is kind of like a partnership between me and him. Okay. And the rest of the band is been kind of shifting, really, but there's so many great musicians in London. We never have problems with kind of bringing in like really talented people, you know. So.
And having new collaborators keep coming in, the turnover, I guess, can be, you know, help ignite some juices, maybe ignite old songs or things as they.
Yeah, it can. I mean, me and Ian are the main writers. And but bringing in different musicians, they can approach the music slightly differently, and it can take the music in different directions. So yeah, I mean, the lineup we have right now is phenomenal. I mean,
do we want to give them some shout out?
Oh yeah. There's a bass player we have called Matteo Grassi. I've been playing gigs with him in various projects for about 15 years, and he's phenomenal. We have a few drummers on rotation at the moment as well. The guy on the album, his name's Alessio Borelli. A lot of Italian connection in the band. And he plays with a lot of... there's an artist called Tony Monreal. I don't know if you've heard of him at all. He sings for Incognito. Do you know them guys at all?
I have not heard of them.
They're like a kind of British jazz funk band. They tour quite a lot in the States, you know. And but we've got a trombone player called Tom White, who's played with Jamiroquai and people like that.
I've heard of Jamiroquai.
And quite a few kind of pop acts, and a guy called Paul Silver, he's a multi-instrumentalist. Kind of, he plays baritone sax for us, but he's one of these kind of genius guys that can kind of play anything. And yeah, they're all super talented. And we got a guy who kind of does some gigs with us, but he's on the album, a guy called Carl Hudson, who plays keyboards. He's done a lot of stuff with he's done stuff with the Brand New Heavies and things like that. And he was touring in the States actually recently with Boy George as well, like a few pop acts as well. So they're all kind of killer players, kind of virtuosos. So yeah, it's great to gig with them, you know. And
well, let's do the new album since you mentioned Hudson. One of the tracks, it says he has a co-credit on with the two of you. How is that when you have him or one of the other guys in the band as a co-credit? Is it a matter of they brought in a theme or something and you guys worked it up together, or did they just happen to be in the room when you were working through something?
I think what happened with that was we'd already kind of written the track, and then we took it to Carl, and he kind of embellished it. He came up with kind of keyboard lines and just kind of expanded on the idea, really. So yeah, it's some of these tunes can kind of form when you're in the studio, really. So it's good sometimes not to have like a set idea. So with that tune, I think it's called Mind's Eye. I think it's about the 7th tune on the album. Yeah, I think he just expanded on what we'd already kind of written, really. So yeah, it's a beautiful tune.
Yeah, and I love that you've been putting out some video too on your YouTube channel. Maybe when you were all doing some recording, I've seen it for Chronic Tonic. Keep
That's
Right
right.
On was another one, and I really appreciate that, because for us it's kind of like this, look at how you all interact with each other when you're working. And I was curious. You mentioned the instrumental kind of work, right? That you're kind of in that zone. Do you feel like that makes you all a little more nimble to maybe try different things, or does that give you more freedom, do you think, musically?
It does in a live kind of context, because we can improvise quite a lot, and because a lot of the guys in the band do, even though we're kind of doing kind of funky music, they do have jazz kind of chops and all that kind of thing. So if we want to at any point, we can kind of stretch out, and it can kind of go anywhere. It's an interesting mix at the moment, because when the band first started, as band leader, I was running it more like a kind of a James Brown philosophy, where everything was kind of rehearsed to the note. And whereas in the last few years we've been trying to explore a little bit more, and yeah, I think the interaction between the musicians is really positive. And I mean, I do a couple of other improvised kind of projects, and sometimes it can be really good, and sometimes you can't really. I'm trying to think of the word right now. It depends. It can be good, or sometimes it can just be mediocre. But that's the danger of it. The beauty of it is the kind of danger. And I'm sure I know you guys are into the whole jam band scene. You've seen a lot of improvised music in your time, and
love to see someone take the risk, though. That's the whole thing, is watching someone take the risk.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you can get some beautiful moments that way. I mean, when the band's been touring, I think one of the things about doing multiple gigs together is the communication gets stronger with every gig. So we've never had a chance to do any kind of proper tours, kind of, so to speak, but I'd love to get to that point where we get into it. I think there's like a sweet spot where you get to like 3 or 4 gigs in, where because you know the set really well. I think that's when really good stuff kind of happens, and I think a lot of musicians will kind of agree with that. You can when you kind of get your touring legs, especially if you're doing kind of partly improvised music.
It's almost a running joke with jam bands. You don't want to go to the first couple shows of the tour, let them get warmed up, catch like the 4th show on, you'll be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a running joke for sure. And I always think of it like with any major event or planning, in the audience, we don't know what you all might have in mind. We're coming at it very fresh. We're bringing our own daily lives, whatever we have with us, we're coming into that show with all of that. And I think for me at least, huge fan of instrumental music. It gives me a chance mentally to kind of go in whatever direction I want to go in as I'm listening. I can kind of pick up on what I'm hearing, but it leaves so much room for interpretation as a fan. So the improvisation part, I think, is even to a larger degree. And I'm with Kevin. I always appreciate, you can tell when a band is they're just going with it. They're really just up there. They have that telepathy going or whatever it is, or someone just says, you know what, I'm just going to take this in this direction. And I think that is the beauty of that scene in general. I would imagine, though, that there are different levels of comfort with doing things like that, maybe based on someone's prior experience or where they come to performing from. And I'm sure not everyone would necessarily feel that way about it.
Yeah, I think kind of, Kevin, I did speak to you about 10 minutes ago about this. We were talking about the concept for this album, because a lot of the arrangements on the album are quite short, intentionally. So the kind of concept behind it was to do something kind of concise, so it would give people a taste of what the live sets are like. And so when they kind of hear the tunes live, they're like, "Whoa, okay, this is kind of the expanded, improvised version." And if we can kind of improvise, and keep it fresh every time, I think it's challenging, but I think, that's the great thing about live music in that kind of context. If you're having a good night, it's really good. And yeah, it's all good.
This was a conscious thing for the new album, to strip it down, do just the song. Now, when your EP and your previous album, was the idea to try to recreate the live experience in the studio? Was there a different, or was it just you decided to clean it up, make it tight?
Yeah, I was originally thinking of it like a kind of four kind of equivalent to like 445s, like you get to give you almost like a promotional tool to a certain extent. So it's like 4 singles, 4 double A-side singles, really. And I don't know whether it's because, I was worrying that people's attention spans sometimes, it depends on the listener, to be honest, but whether packing something into 3.5 minutes will give people like an idea of what the band does. On the EPs we did before, we were just kind of going for really, there was no kind of main concept. And some of the tunes can go to 6 or 7 minutes on the EP. And I think on our first album, one of the tunes is 10 minutes long. So we decided gradually to try and kind of rein it in over time, but you never know. The next album could be long form jams.
One song, part 1 and part 2.
Maybe we'll see where it goes.
So I'm thinking about this, of course, in the context of where I live here in Denver. That it's a huge city for supporting live music, the kind of music we're talking about. I was just really curious, from your perspective, what is the appetite for what you do? The local community music scene, is it supportive? How have you found that recently, post-COVID? I feel like some things have changed a little bit for people.
Yeah, it's been, it's been a bit of a struggle since COVID, I think, for a lot of scenes or music scenes generally, but we're quite lucky in London because London seems quite resilient to that kind of thing. And the London scene has always been healthy and very creative. So we're lucky to have still a lot of good live venues in London. Outside London, it's a different story, unfortunately, because I think some cities are unfortunately losing kind of grassroots kind of venues for the kind of thing we play. I think it's the same story in the States right now, isn't it, really? But London, yeah, it's its own beast, really. It's almost like a small country within a country, really, culturally. And the scene is very good. we're lucky enough to be able to play some really good venues because like we've built up this kind of momentum over the last 10 years, and we're playing places like Ronnie Scott's this year as well, and a few places out of town as well. And yeah, it is, the audience is there. They do love it. They do love it. And I think London as well, because it tends to attract a lot of tourists as well. There's always kind of footfall for a lot of these venues as well, and a lot of the music fans go straight for these venues as well because they know the music is going to be of kind of fairly high quality. I think probably London's kind of very, very similar to places like New York in that respect, probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You said you had your eye on Europe. You had mentioned to me for a place to tour. Do you ever think about America trying to break in, or is that just a crazy idea?
I would love to. I would love to.
You got to get into New York. You would fit in New York because it's like London, you know?
Absolutely. It's just making the connections, really, to be honest. And it's to find out. Well, we are kind of self-financed at the moment, so we don't have the backing of a label, or we don't have a booking agent, so to speak, in the moment. So we're going to try and make moves within the next year or couple of years to do that. But I think I would love to, because I know there's bands like the new Mastersounds that have been over there for years now. And Eddie Roberts, he relocated, didn't he? I think
people crave that. That's why I think if we got you into a wider audience, that you could probably get that same reaction. Like Alan Evans, when we talked to him about Soul Live, he's like, you know, these people showed up and they loved what we did, and they'd show up again the next night. You know?
Yeah. And not for nothing, Eddie lives out here, you know, just a couple miles from where I live. And the scene and the community that has, you know, just continued to grow over time. He's a huge part of that with his label. And I think that, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I feel a lot of support across artists and bands for wanting to make that happen. And I've seen some great bands out of Western Canada, you know, recently kind of get into the markets, like Kevin's saying, that really do come out and show up and just love live music. And they're going to take that free night and go see a band that maybe they haven't seen before, because they know that if it's happening at a particular venue, you know, it's going to be great, and they want that. And so, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. And I understand what you're saying too. You all are kind of in a microcosm where you live, and it could be an hour outside of London, could be a completely different experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the US market is kind of interesting, because there's a lot of bands that we love that are around right now, like Lettuce and bands like that, and Snarky Puppy, kind of
King Gizzard.
Galactic.
King Gizzard
Is that
huge. I mean, they have vocals. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Jam band fans love them, and I'm like, what are you listening to this? This is not jam band music. They're heavy metal, you know.
So them guys from Australia, King Gizzard.
Yes.
They are, right.
Yeah.
They play Red Rocks. I mean, they play like 7,000 seat venues.
Amazing.
It's amazing. God, I love
it. It does seem, I think the UK market is good, and the European market is very good as well, specifically for kind of things like jazz and kind of things like Afrobeat. But it does seem that the US scene, in terms of the jam band scene for instrumental music, is fairly strong, you know. If we can make connections, that would be amazing at some point, you know.
That would what did James Brown say? I don't want no one to give me nothing. Just open up the door. I'll get it myself.
That's right. Give it myself.
I mean,
I
that's what
love
it all
it.
comes down to.
So let me ask you, you have I feel like the band has a very distinct sound, like your guitar has a very distinct sound, but you do funk, you do jazz, you do soul. How do you like stay true to doing something that's more soul flavored while making sure you're John?
Wow, good question. It's kind of interesting because I got influence from playing with various different types of projects in the past. My roots are in jazz, funk, and soul, and all that kind of thing. But for a while, I was playing with some artists from kind of West Africa.
Okay.
And I was really into people like Manu Dibango, Fela Kuti. Do you know them guys?
Yes,
Yeah. Afrobeat.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of gives me kind of my own kind of distinct style of playing, and it kind of comes through. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does, because there is. I feel like if somebody else played one of your songs, it wouldn't sound the same because of the uniqueness of what you do, and I think it has some of that. There's what was like the surf music. What was his name? Dick Dale. That guy.
Right. Yeah.
Apparently he learned a lot of Turkish music. That's where a lot of what came out of with the surf music was him learning Turkish stuff. So I love that, putting the pieces together there, kind of.
Yeah, it's anybody's style is just like a combination of all their experiences. Like, so, I mean, that's one of the amazing things about London is, like we're saying, how similar it is to New York, because it's like a cultural hub for a lot of musicians. So you don't just get English musicians playing there; you get musicians from all over Europe and from South America, from Brazil, kind of West Africa, South Africa, and all this kind of thing. And
most music in the world isn't Western music.
That's right. That's right. It's all from Africa in some form to a certain extent. Anyway, I mean, that's the amazing thing about the city. Really, it's there's people are jamming together from different backgrounds, and it kind of happens really beautifully like that, So I think that's how I came up. Well, I didn't really come up with the sound; it just kind of happened,
What about the horns? Do you write out horn charts, or do you bring the guys in and just let them vamp over what you got?
Well, Ian, the horn arranger, he's got a lot more wider musical knowledge. Well, I would say in terms of musical theory than I have. So what will happen is I'll come up maybe with the basis of an idea of a tune, and I might have a horn line in mind, or he might have a horn line in mind. And what he does is he just arranges it for the horn section, really. And I just kind of give him pointers, really, and he just kind of expands on it, really. He's really talented that way. I can't actually, believe it or not, I can't kind of read or write music, so I do it all by ear.
Do you feel like the horns are an extension? Do you feel like the horns are an extension of the rhythm, or more of a counterpoint to what you do?
I think it's both, really, because some of the horn lines that I've come up with tend to be very, what they call polyrhythmic, and it does come from that James Brown kind of tradition, or the Fela Kuti kind of thing. It's what bands like Lettuce do quite a lot, and But on this album, we've actually tried to make it a bit more melodic in places, but the funk is always there. The groove is kind of always there, But it's kind of interesting writing specifically for horns, I mean, this band kind of only started off as an experiment, kind of 13 years ago, and we're still writing, so we must be doing something right, you know. So yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
We've talked to horns players from a number of different bands. Dumpsta Funk was one, Alex Wasili, and one of the things that he had shared, kind of specific to horns parts when he will receive them, is kind of how from his experience, and Kevin, call me out if I'm not remembering this correctly, you know, there's a lot of flexibility given to how he interprets those parts.
Right.
And he can kind of take them in whichever direction. So his prep is maybe a little bit different than it would be for someone in a different part of the band, like a, you know, rhythm section or something. But we also talked about the idea of regional horn players and how, at least in the States, that used to be a really popular concept where if you're going to one area or another, you would work with the musicians that live, let's say, in New Orleans. You know, you might pick them up for shows. And it kind of sounds like, in a way, when you were talking about the makeup of the band, that there might be something similar. And I mean, I think that's a practical thing, but it also can bring different elements to songs depending on where you are or who exactly you're working with. Do you feel that way too?
Yeah, I don't know whether I think that definitely could be a thing with the States, really, because the country is so big, and you, like you say, you get a regional, like a stylistic way of playing. I have heard before that New York players sound different to LA players and all this kind of thing. They can approach music a lot differently, like you say, New Orleans. In the UK, because we're a lot smaller, I'm not sure if that applies, but I totally understand the concept of that. I think, with us, in terms of what the horns are doing, I think they have their own influences. I mean, it can apply to if we have different musicians coming in. If they're reading the same chart, they can kind of play it differently. So we have like what is like a kind of A team, really, of the main players in the band, but somebody can kind of come in and give, bring their own different flavor to it. So I think that's kind of relative to what you were talking about, I think, as well.
Their phrasings might be unique.
You can bring a different feel to the tune. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I know like Eric Benny from, you mentioned Lettuce a couple times. He's got a very particular way, at least that I've heard over time, of how he phrases solos and whatnot. And when you get used to hearing that, you can kind of take someone and kind of pick their sound out with your ear. And I always find that really fascinating because that adds different dimensions to any song. And that's one of the reasons I love bands that have a horn section, because I feel like there's just so much depth there. And it's always exciting because you never really know what they're going to do in some ways. It's kind of open in certain regards.
Yeah, I think horn sections are amazing. I was kind of thinking about this, the influence, really. And I think my roots with that kind of thing is my dad is a jazz trumpet player. Okay. And he used to be a big band leader as well. So I grew up hearing kind of walls of horns, on stage and all that kind of thing. And I think that led me on to the whole James Brown thing and all that kind of thing. So maybe, I think that's where my influence comes from, really. I mean, even when we're doing kind of funk, the jazz influence is kind of very strong. We don't even realize it, really. I think bands like Lettuce are probably they're the funkier side of funk, if that makes any sense, compared to what we're doing, really. We're probably closer to artists like maybe old school artists like the Brecker Brothers and Tower of Power. Maybe I'm not sure. It's hard to judge really when you're actually inside the project. You need people with good ears sometimes to kind of
I
tell
can
you,
work
you
with
know.
I can work with the Tower of Power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nodded ahead there. Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you, what about a vocalist? Have you ever thought about bringing someone in to sing one song? You had mentioned Galactic, and they had the Houseman for a while. Now they have Jelly Bean with them, and she comes out and sings half the set, and the other half is still instrumentals.
Well, we did on our first album. We had a couple of kind of guest vocalists, but we decided around 10 years ago to kind of concentrate on the instrumental thing. But I think there's always talk of bringing in vocalists, and I think the next album we'd love to do that. And I think as much as I love doing instrumental music, I think bringing in vocalists opens you up to it sells tickets. It's more accessible, and it's easier to kind of market really.
Right. There's a band out of Perth, instrumental band called Surprise Chef, and when we were talking to them, we were like, we were talking about a singer, and we were like, "What's the best part about not having a singer?" And he goes, "Not having a singer." It's like,
yeah,
oh, like right on. I think you'd like them. They do what they call cinematic soul. It's kind of like Isaac Hayes, cool. Curtis Mayfield kind of thing,
So they're from Australia, you're saying?
Yeah, from Perth, yes. Yeah, when we talked to them, Australia's off the hook. 4 a.m, I think, was when I had to do it from here because it was 4 p.m. there. It's 12 hours different.
Yeah, and they're on Big Crown Records, which I think really supports that kind of music, also.
Right, cool.
That kind of sound.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
what's the other band from Australia, Amanda? Oh, the Psychedelic Porn Crumpets.
Oh yeah, well, you've got the Bamboos. There's so many. I'm a personal fan, and I'm working with him to get him on the show because I had interviewed him years ago for another show. Angus Leslie out of Melbourne. He's with a band called Sex on Toast, and they've been around for over almost 20 years, just doing crazy. They have a lot of horns. They're out there. But there's so much music. I think that.
Yeah. So they have some of the best names, the Australian bands, by the sounds of it, doesn't it? It's so
good.
King Gizzard, Sex on Toast.
They got past the whole Air Supply thing, They were like, we can't be naming bands Air Supply anymore. None of that. I'm going to get shot. Somebody out there likes Air Supply.
There's a lot of talent in Australia at the moment. Yeah, it's very encouraging. And you've got bands is it Hiatus Coyote are from there as well? Have you heard of them guys?
I think so, yes.
They're more like a kind of neo soul band, but
Yeah. I love that. I love the whole thing. Let me ask you this. What was up with England in the 60s and the 70s with the disproportionate number of musicians and huge songs that came out of England? For as small as England is, you guys had all the hits at one point.
I don't know if I could give you an answer. I think it was just a wave at the time. I think it was probably started by the Beatles, probably the whole wave from there and on into Pink Floyd and all them kind of guys, Led Zeppelin and stuff.
The Stones.
I can't really.
The Stones owned America at one point.
The Stones. I mean, the interesting thing is that majority of their artists were heavily influenced by American artists. Really, they're inspired by American artists. So you've got that kind of whole loop thing kind of going on. It's kind of interesting because some of the bands I got into when I was younger, there was, I don't know if you know much about the kind of British acid jazz scene from the early 90s. And there's bands like the Brand New Heavies and, Incognito, Jamiroquai. They were playing a lot of American influenced music, and they were going to America to play the same music back to the American audience. It's like selling sand back to the Arab side,
You're
kind of thing.
repackaging. Just repackage it. In the front door, out the back door.
But I think the original British invasion, it is kind of interesting. Yeah, I think I can't explain how that happened, to be honest. But there was a lot of talent, a lot of drugs being taken, and I think it's definitely the influence of things like Motown had a big influence on the Beatles, as well as the Beach Boys and stuff, and they were really into R&B and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's the same as the Stones, really. So
yeah, they were a cover band. I mean, the Beatles were a cover band when they were playing in Germany, basically.
Yeah.
You know what?
It's all back to you guys, It's all comes back to American music, really, and that's the same for what we do, really, because even though
that's my thesis on punk rock is that America really created punk rock, but Malcolm McLaren got himself a boy band, the Sex Pistols, and sold it to the world.
Wasn't it more like MC5 and bands like that was kind of
MC5, the New York Dolls? Yeah, the New York Dolls, Richard Hell and Television, when Richard Hell was before television became more jazz, whatever I guess they created alternative rock on some levels. So the new album comes out October 4th? Is that what I'm told?
So that's October 4th, next Friday. Yeah.
Very nice. And this is going to be Bandcamp, I know. I know on a Bandcamp I saw you could pre-order. Where else are we going to find it?
It's on all the streaming platforms, so it'll be on Spotify, Apple Music, and all that kind of thing. But purely for the vinyl, Bandcamp is the place right now, because we're looking to kind of sort out a distributor.
We want to buy the product. Yes, buy the T-shirt, buy the product, go to the show. Don't listen to Spotify.
Absolutely. So,
oh man, that's right. You got anything else there? You got anything else, Amanda?
No, I was thinking about this question, or I guess that theme of, it's almost a chicken or the egg, right? When we're talking about music from different places. And I was thinking about what I gravitate toward my own personal listening is a lot of the Northern Soul. It's like Jalapeno Records roster, the Allergies, those producers, lack of Afro. I mean, that's my daily listening is mostly that, to be honest. And so I'm just sitting here and there's no answer for it, but I'm just musing about, okay, so how amazing it is that there seems to be this ongoing kind of symbiotic relationship where everyone's just influenced and loving music from these different places. But then I'm thinking, but what is it about what you do, what all those artists do, that I personally, just without thinking about it, keep going back to on a daily basis over and over again? And so I don't have an answer for that, but there's something there that is different.
It is interesting. Yeah, I've heard that before. I think British musicians and artists, they tend to approach it in their own way, I think. I've heard this before because back in the early 80s, there was a whole kind of what they call Brit funk scene of bands like Light of the World, Incognito, and all this kind of thing. They were doing a lot of music influenced by a lot of American jazz, funk, and soul, and all this kind of thing. But they kind of had their own approach and a sound to it, And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just the British way of approaching. I'm trying to think of the word on that, but it's the British temperament kind of approaches the music slightly differently. They kind of use the influences slightly differently, and that's maybe the same with us because we're doing our own form of jazz funk, which is heavily influenced by a lot of American artists, but it probably still sounds British, to a certain extent.
And I don't think about it, consciously. But if you were to go look up, the most played, and I know I'm not the only one, I have conversations about this a lot. It just so happens that there must be something that resonates either in the cadence, timing, tempo, cleaner sound, something. I'm not sure what.
Subliminal messages.
There must be something there. I don't know, but I just have always loved that, and that's my go-to for sure.
I think one of the influences as well is what I think what's different culturally is that a lot of music in the UK has come out the club scene, the kind of nightclub scene. So I don't know if it's the same in the States, but in a lot of the things like the acid jazz scene that came out of what was originally acid house scene. So kind of related to drugs, supposedly, again. Very much like the 60s movement. So,
right on.
And then you end up in the West Coast of America. There were all of a sudden there was an acid jazz kind of scene with like the Gray Boy All Stars, DJ Gray Boy,
that's right.
Some of those other bands. So that's weird that it spun back all the way around there.
Yeah. But I didn't mean to open up a whole new topic, but I appreciate what you do, and your sound is so good. Love to get you guys over here.
So if I'm in London over the next month or so, do I get a chance to see you guys?
We're playing Ronnie Scott's on November the 1st. That's our next gig, and we're back there at the end of December as well. We have a gig actually in Nottingham, which is up north in the UK as well. But November the 1st is our next gig. So we're going to be.
So how are you approaching the set list with the whole 8 new songs?
It's a good point, actually, because there's some tunes on the album we've hardly gigged, and we're already getting people asking, "Are you going to do that tune?" And I was like, well, we've got all these tunes from the other albums we made, and we've only got an hour and a half, like 90-minute set. So, I'm hoping we can get as much as the album as possible into the next set. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, and
which one? Keep Right On or Near Earth Objects? What's the one people are talking about?
Well, somebody the other day was asking about Mind's Eye, which is the tune with Carl, and it's not actually part. It's not actually part of the set right now. So we're gonna. I think I've got an idea to do an expanded kind of a long version of that. I think as part of the set, we can just take it stratospheric because Carl likes to kind of take it out there with his kind of synth, kind of cosmic kind of vibes. So I think, I'd like to expand on that, definitely. Mm-hmm. So,
let it be a little bit of a centerpiece kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Love it. I love it. I love when bands take the new songs and do that, and they aren't afraid to say that we're moving forward and this is the best stuff we're doing is right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Anything else you want to throw out, John, before we let you get back to?
No, not really. Well, we've got the album coming out next week, so if people want to do like a Google search on us for our Bandcamp, and if you're interested in buying the album,
I'll have a link. You'll have a link.
Cool.
Yes.
And we've got quite a few more interesting things coming up on our social media in the next couple of weeks. We've got a couple more tunes coming from that live kind of video session that you've seen already. Yep. So, and looking forward to these gigs that are coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Hang on for a sec. I'm going to run an outro here. Everybody watching, if you're watching this later, make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow us at All That Jam Pod on social media. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. We'll see you soon.